and hope that they have stimulated you to ask questions. By now you have listened to 10 speakers. It's your turn. Please, ma'am, introduce yourself and make a comment or ask a question.
Thank you.
And then I ask the panelists to hold back for a moment, and we listen first to the audience.
Thank
Please
you.
go ahead.
I'm Başak.
It works.
Working?
Yeah,
okay. Başak Boboğlu from Metro AG. We are a wholesaler and a retail company. Thank you very much to all the panelists and the speakers. I don't have a question, but I have a brief remark about an issue that has partially been addressed by Professor Hermansen and Mr. Leip. We have a hub, NX Food, Next Generation Food, to work on new food systems, food solutions, future food solutions to meet consumer demands. And we are empowering startup initiatives and bringing some novel food products to our shelves. And we recently have a cooperation with Eurowings and Retail in Motion, the in-flight service provider, to bring these products to the in-flight bistro magazine of Eurowings flights as of August this year. So we are very thrilled to do this, but this is a pilot project. This is a phase that we want to test. And as long as there is no big consumer demand, so to say, we cannot keep our shelves forever with these products. So I think we should all work on increasing the consumer demand and the consumer appetite in the Western diets for these products. I haven't read the report yet, so I don't know if it's really addressed in the report or not. But we should work on ways to increase the appetite for these products in the Western diets. Otherwise, it just stays as a pilot project, and we can't move further.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, sir. Microphone is coming.
First of all, I'm delighted that the academies have taken on this challenge of the future of food.
Please introduce yourself.
Sorry, my name is Peter Lilford. I'm a member of the Academy of the Food Science and Technology and a member of the UK National Technology Platform for Food. So, first of all, congratulations on the attempt itself and the other reports that are coming out as well. But I would like to challenge that you've left in this report a bit of an elephant in the room, because you mentioned we go from agriculture to health. And of course you do that by a series of transformation steps which have been mentioned by one or two of the panellists. But I'd like to challenge you to go a bit further. The issue is that the bit in the middle is industrial and works for profit. So the reason we eat the food we do is because people make money out of it and like it. Now what's happened in Europe is, therefore, we've made nice food, fairly cheap, with the wrong nutrients. What we have to do is engage those people, because policymakers can make policy and they can police it, but they don't make food. And there's an awful lot of knowledge and requirement for knowledge in that bit in the middle that converts raw materials into healthy foods. So my question, I think, to the panelists is how, and to you, sir, as well, is how to engage the private sector in the ethical and corporate issues that we face.
Okay, well taken. The question was here? He asked your question, or you made your point?
Another question.
Okay.
Already?
Okay.
Hello. I'm Mark Cornelissen. I'm from the ETP Plans for the Future, like Alexandra. I have a general question that fits actually very well with what Thomas was saying, I guess. To drive change in a complex matter of this type, you need, above all, a cultural shift in the mindset. And so I was just wondering, in what kind of positive ways, not negative ways by scaring people, but in positive ways actually, we can promote the feeling within society about sense of urgency in this matter.
Okay, good point. Please, microphone all the way to the back. Could I have a sign of hand? Who else would like to come in? The rest will debate over snacks. Go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Fernandez. I represent Food Week Europe and the European technology platform Food for Life. And I wanted also to build on the comment that we just heard about how to engage private sector as well in these discussions. And from our side, I can just say that we are very aware of the challenges that we have, our role in food and nutrition security, but also that we should not be seen as part of the problem, but also as part of the solution. And that's why we think that there is a need to transform the European food and nutrition system as a way to lead the transformation that is much needed worldwide, and that for that no stakeholder can do this alone, no private company can do this alone. That's why some of the comments that I have heard in the panel sound like music to my ears, because we need this integrative approach, bringing everyone together to discuss these topics and try to find solutions, because we are all aware of the challenges, but now it's time to really find the ways that will leave us there. And in this context, just also to let you know that we are also part of a coordination and support action called Fit for Food 2030, where we try to really take these discussions to 3 different levels: city, regional, to see alignment within policies at different member states, and European level, to really work together towards this change that is reflected in the report that also fed into our project as well. It was very timely because it came in December when we were starting our activities. And yes, that we are ready to work together.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Dear panelists, I would like to ask you to react. You have heard comments on next generation food, how to change behavior. You have heard about the role of industry. By the way, food industry invests a lot of resources in science, maybe not always for the right purpose, but I think the supermarket industry probably understands consumers better than most of behavioral scientists in universities. There is some scope for cooperation. I'm not sarcastic. I think there should be scope for cooperation. Let me point that out. Sense of urgency was called upon, and a constructive engagement with private sector. Anne-Marie, you have a food technology background. Would you kick it off, and then I just go one by one? And feel free to react to what you have heard and what you have not heard from the audience. Please go ahead.
I would like to react to this role of the industry, because it's very interesting. I mean, when it comes to food science and technology, there are many projects that require a collaboration between industry and science. So that's almost a must, that you should have industrial partners in your project. When you go to the nutrition side, and we should have an interface here, it's the other way around. If you interact with industry, it's more like being criminal. So there you have a completely different mindset. And I read, it was in New York Times around in December, there was a paper from Malaysia where they have a lot terribly overweight people. And there was the prime scientist there, the only scientist who worked on nutrition, he turned out to be paid by Nestle, and that was very bad, of course. But his response was that if Nestle didn't pay him, there wouldn't be any science at all. So I think when we work with along these interfaces, we also have different mindsets and different ways of looking at things. When it comes to food science and technology and industry, we need also critical voices. And the nutritionists have to work with industry. And therefore we need also to combine basic research with applied research. So that is very important.
Yeah. Thank you. Please, Thomas Weitz.
Well, some interesting questions. They're actually linked to each other from my point of view. Sure, private enterprises are basically driven by one thing, and that's making money. So to change anything there, we have to influence exactly that. How are they making their money? And this could be influence on prices. I mean, if we start to price the real production costs of pork production as an example, and we price the externalities, the external damages that are made by pork production as it is nowadays, let's say pollution of soil water, just to mention one example, and if we price that, then the price for pork would go up immediately, and I would say the consumption would go down. So there's the capitalistic market mechanisms which allow us also to influence. But I think more than that, influencing habits of food consumption, it's a question of education, very much. And I think in every school, in every single country, member state of the European Union, we should have education on food and on how to nourish yourself. And we don't have that nowadays, yeah. And it's also linked with the ability of cooking or the preceded food that you buy nowadays in supermarkets. So it's a lot about education. And to again reflect on that question of mindset, and it's also linked to the question on who makes money on what. You also mentioned it in your report. We have these problems around pork production and multi-resistant bacteria because you have a prophylactic and metaphylactic use of antibiotics in pork production. The bigger the stable is, the more antibiotics you have to use, because if you have 10,000 or 100,000 pork in the stable, you can't select single animals that are ill. You just feed antibiotics to all of them. So what is the solution then? There's one way of saluting it, and this is the money-making way. Well, let's breed with whatever techniques pork which are not affected so much maybe by these bacteria, yeah. And this is a track where industry can make money on, because they have the patent then on that pork, on that bred pork, and then they sell their patented pork and so on and so forth. So that works because there's money behind that. On the other hand, we could just reduce the size and reduce and enlarge the space the pork have, yeah? So less stress, yeah, and less amounts of animals, so the farmer is still capable to know his animals or her animals and to be capable to select ill animals, and then there's no need for such huge amounts of antibiotics. But that means less income for the antibiotic producers, no income for patents on pork, yeah? More workplaces for farmers, okay, but the lobby for farmers is not as strong as the industrial one. And again, it's a question of mindset. And don't misunderstand me, it's not an approach against technological advantage, not at all. Yeah? But it's, if we have to keep in mind who is earning the profit, and the most profit is not always the cleverest solution.
Adrian Leib.
I would like to put one technology which would be really easy to make a first step towards a more sustainable food system that would not be sufficient, but that is already a first step. That would be just reducing our meat consumption, because we all know that this is not good for the health and that's not good for the environment. So if we would bring people in eating less of meat and livestock products, that would be already a first and important step. But it's not yet happening. So we have to ask, and you asked that in the report as well, to understand why is it not happening. And I think there's one dimension that, yeah, it's because it's in the culture and the tradition of people, but there's also the whole marketalization and how our economy works that might be part of the game. And yes, we have to engage the private sector, and I think that's also what I put forward in my statement before. It's not about blaming, but it's just making clear that there is a shared responsibility, and of course everybody makes what they are supposed to do and what their job is basically. But there's also the dimension of being aware of what the consequences of their own actions are, and I think this is something that really needs to be made clear to all that are involved. I would like to make one more point to the questions that were raised by Dr. Fierce before about what is the impact of EU on the global food system, and I think there are many different aspects to that. I mean, the most obvious one is, of course, via the economy and via the trade, that each policy that is implemented in Europe will have an effect of global trade flows, might have emission leakages, so that we have the emissions that are not occurring anymore in Europe. If we want to keep it clean, they would happening elsewhere. We have to avoid that, because that would not be the objectives that we really are aiming at. There could be influences in food systems in other regions, other continents, which we might want to avoid or which we might want to support. But there's, of course, also the export of innovations, so the technology and science development that we might do in Europe might be helpful also for other world regions. I think that is something that is also quite important. And one more aspect is the aspiration level. I mean, the Western diet is something that might be imitated, or where other regions are going towards it. So, and if we are changing our Western style, our Western habits, going to a more sustainable way of how we are behaving in our food system, that could be an example also for our world regions, and changing the trend in the other regions where they are aspiring to.
Thank you. Alexandra Maleska.
Okay, so starting with the first issue raised about the interface between nutrition and health and the involvement of industry, I think that a very good example of how we can see and look in the future, and how what research innovation can bring, could be a microbiome field. A microbiome field, the increasing body of knowledge that we have about how the microorganisms in our gut could improve our well-being and our health, and how the food could be related to the state, to the healthy microbiome in our gut. And for that might be a whole new opportunities and new markets that would incentivize industry to come into the field. So that's the first comment I would like to give. The second one, addressing the increasing urgency, how to make people aware in a positive way. I would very much agree with Thomas that education is a very good approach, but it has to be fun, it has to be interesting. How you get people involved in relevant issue? You need to feel that it is relevant to you. So if you want to increase awareness, you need to make people in their local communities aware and believe that this is relevant for me. And they are then very much more open and prone to change their behaviors. If you develop educational strategies embedded in a local environment, so you can feel that the changes of your behavior can influence your farmer, your city, your neighborhood, your success might be much more obvious than when you talk about the global issues and global changes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nevada.
Okay, the way we stand now is that nutritious food is more expensive than other food that has no the same nutritional value. So if we want to change consumer preferences, we really need to resolve the poverty and to end the hunger. With hungry people that are going to bed without having had a dinner or lunch, means that we cannot progress on sustainability aspects. So really we have to unite ourselves to resolve these issues and then go ahead. Then after that, the industry will not have the incentive to produce cheap food any longer. And all people would like to live forever, to be young as long as they can. So in their benefit is to have a food with a higher nutrition value, healthy and sustainable, also environmentally sustainable. So this is really my message. And then other incentives, positive, could be a proper labeling of nutrients and so on. But for that we really need serious research data. And we have them, but we need to explore more on the big data, on open data. Of course, education, communication and proactiveness of the researchers is to play and will play a role. But we need to change our acquis. This is something that is really obvious, for me at least. Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, your take.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of points. One is that I do agree very much with some of the previous points about the importance of change to price externalities, for example, and to reduce antibiotic use in farming. I think actually there are some lessons of good practice in the EU which has led worldwide some of the issues for reducing precautionary antibiotic use. There is further to go, but we can share those lessons of good practice. With regard to the questions relating to next generation food and the role of industry, I would just add, by way of advertising, the forthcoming global report from the IAP that draws on all of the 4 regional reports, as we heard previously, and will be available later this year. But we do have in this global synthesis quite a lot of discussion on how to develop and how to define, how to develop and how to deliver healthy, sustainable foods and healthy, sustainable diets. I don't think we have all of the answers to the questions, but I will just mention that in our global discussion, we do draw on evidence from the other regions, for example, with regard to the advent of functional foods. These are particularly being used in some of the Asian region, for example. The scientific opportunities for doing more with orphan crops. Again, this is something that's raised very much by our colleagues in Africa and Asia. And there are worldwide applications of what had been novel crops, novel food sources that can be applied worldwide. I think quinoa might be a good European example of that. Originally a relatively small crop produced in South America, now at least in the UK, in London, a very fashionable novel food. So there are opportunities, and the point is that the quinoa genome has now been ascertained, so there are opportunities to breed cultivars of quinoa that are applicable to the European daylight and so on. So it can be adopted here. Other next generation foods that we talk about in the global report, for example, cultured meat, again, that's been very fashionable in some regards. But I think we are beginning to see scientific proof of principle, whether it will be commercial, whether it will be acceptable, these are further issues. But the scientific proof of principle is emerging. And just to reinforce the point from Alexandra, research advances in understanding the human gut microbiome may well lead to new sorts of dietary intervention, applicable, again we're talking about research in the future, but applicable to novel approaches to obesity or other non-communicable diseases. So there is a big research and innovation agenda out there that we will touch on more in our global report, where we didn't have room to do it at the European level. Thank you.
Well, colleagues, the real challenge which we got from the panel was Nevena Alexandrova's point that she likes these points, but she is missing assertiveness. So let me try to be a bit assertive. First by assertively thanking the panel, but also making a few substantive points. John Bell was very clear and complimentary and was underlining the timeliness of our report. There seems to be a window of opportunity, and that Bulgaria, the Bulgarian presidency, has these issues high on the agenda, I think is a great opportunity. Thank you for your statements, Karina Angelieva. That Plovdiv is an opportunity to raise this to a European-wide audience is significant. But you underlined, make clear to policy making how to specifically use research. So the usability, the sort of the value chain of research from academia to application, I think was underlined. Thomas Weitz saw some issues with the pesticides issues. which we address as problems, but you raised a very interesting opportunity to use a lot more of digital smart farming technology, farm robotics, to kill the either the weed or the bug. This is frontier science currently. Actually, frontier science where the robot either flying or rolling small instruments with a needle rather than with a pesticide spraying are already in test actually at my university in Bonn. And if you visit the Agritechnica, the World Fair of Agricultural Technology in Hanover, this year more than 400,000 visitors, all the new awards were not given for some old chemical technologies, but for new mechanical digitization technology. So industry is already in that direction in close collaboration with science, and I think may not be fast enough, but an area. Adrian Leib, you highlighted key issues related to climate change and the population issues, but also the role of foresight research, the complexity of foresight, which we have underlined, but maybe not forcefully enough. We have this and that foresight study, interesting ones, but we really need high caliber foresight research community making use of big data and so on in Europe, and JRC probably is a location where this should be brought together. Anne-Marie, you had underlined the key role of food technology, which I think is one of the novelties in this report, to underline the tremendous opportunities of new science influencing food technology, including the land-independent agriculture. You grow your salad in the kitchen next to your refrigerator in the innovative LED equipment. Is already existing, not only in Singapore, but also in Europe. Still too expensive, but it is coming. So whole new lines of food technology connecting the technology to the consumer directly. Colleagues, it is clear that talking about food and nutrition, we talk about culture, behavior, and very sensitive issues. We have, in this report, taken a clear position on regulatory issues. Puts them on the institutional, economic, legal, science, research agenda. That's so critical, for instance, in the field of giving opportunities of the new genomics, of gene editing. And that this needs to be product quality rather than process regulated is a position which is forcefully taken in the report. So we wait for political change and for legal change. The court case pending is all known to you. We have taken a clear position forcefully on the climate threat to European agriculture. Yes, Europe is rich, but when European harvests suffer and when heat shocks hit, a rich Europe will import in order to balance diets and well-being from the rest of the world. So we will externalize the risks which we are able to handle. We have clearly and forcefully addressed that issue in our trade and market and volatility and risk chapters. And Lastly, we have highlighted the whole issues of food safety, about which consumers care so much, and which the research and science community maybe has not connected well enough to consumers' perceptions, the health aspects, and what can scientifically be done about it. The regulatory regimes about food safety are not strong enough, country by country and in Europe as a whole, and the report also highlights that. With these remarks, I'm very pleased to invite you to coffee, maybe also tea and snacks upstairs in a marble room. Look for a marble room, and we look forward to a conversation continued there. Thank you for coming.